All right, hello everyone and welcome back. I am Sarah McDermott, the founder of PRINDIE, and with me today is Marilyn Cooke, who is the writer and director of the short live action film Wanted Strong Woman. So this is an official selection of PRINDIE 2020, which is going to be happening virtually from September 10th to the 13th. And I have to tell you, Marilyn, I just loved this film. This film was
Oh,
just so empowering, so had such a feeling of freedom about it. I absolutely loved it. If ever there was a film that could make me want to be a female wrestler, this is the film. And to give everyone, a quick overview. So this is a story about a woman who's seemingly very mild-mannered at first. She's put into a very nurturing role of a nurse and a caregiver to an uncle with memory loss. But then she gets an opportunity to step into this world of wrestling, which she takes. And it is just such an empowering, freeing process. So again, I love the film, Marilyn. Thank you so much for being here today, just so we can talk about it a little more in depth.
well, thank you. Thank you for selecting me at the festival, and thanks for having me. I'm really always happy to talk about it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, so I guess we'll start at the very beginning. So what was the inspiration for this story?
Great question, and I think it was a lot of different things. I mean, for the wrestling part, like wrestling was always like a family tradition in our household where we would watch used to be WWF back then, and we used to watch it every Sunday night, every Monday night, like I know it was Sunday morning and Monday night. And I just remember being so fascinated by that world because it was like always so over the top and so like theatrical, but at the same time it was so like it seemed like a really like physical feats. And I was really interested in, I was always like especially interested in seeing, because there were women in that sport even at the time. So when I was growing up, so I was always fascinated by like how do these women how do you even get into that sport? It's so marginal and so tough, and these women were always seemed very, very empowered, and I was very it's always something that stuck with me. And another part of it was everything that has to do with the poetry and everything. I always loved poetry.
Mhm.
um, Even since I was a kid, I used to always I love writing poetry too, just like for myself. I'm not a published author or anything like that, but it's always something that I really liked. And at first, when I wrote the story, there was only the part about wrestling, and then the poetry kind of came in as like in this second kind of phase of writing. And I just thought of having that duality between like the lyricism of the poetry and the very kind of vivid imagery mixed with the wrestling. I just found that it was a mix that I had never seen and that I found interesting to explore. So
Wonderful. I was actually going to ask you about the poetry because I do think it adds so much to this film, and I know you wrote those lines yourself. The poetry is really beautiful,
oh, thank
and,
you.
and really stirring, and I do think it adds quite a bit. And like you said, I think it's a very interesting combination of these two things that I wouldn't automatically think to put together, but it works very well, I think.
Oh, thanks. And but yeah, I think also like in the Caribbean culture, which I'm from, there is a big emphasis on poetry and on literature, and I think it's just maybe not very well known.
Mhm.
Or even just like the fact of like one of my uncles was a preacher, so he wasn't a poet, but he had that way with words. So I think it's something also that I've kind of it's seeped into my unconsciousness in one way or another. So.
So the poetry that's in the film, did you write that specifically for the film, or were those poems that you already had that you took from?
No, those were written especially for the film, because like one of the challenges too in writing was to find a way to kind of have, because she's a very subdued character, like you said in the beginning, like she doesn't speak much. And so how do you kind of tap into what she's going through or what she's thinking, and how can I make it in a visual way that's not just like you know uh, a voiceover that's like, today I discovered wrestling. I didn't want to make it too obvious, so I was like, well, I think this is a good way to kind of show also that link between, this was kind of part of the legacy that her uncle was leaving her, was all this poetry and all that sense of you have what it takes to be who you want to be.
Mhm. Right. And speaking of her uncle, so I'm reading about you a little bit online. I think these themes of family kind of are a big thing in your work. So to talk a little bit just about the how you kind of created that character of the uncle and sort of the situation he's in and what he kind of brings to the story.
Um, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm just because I'm just thinking right now, I'm actually writing some new and developing new material too, and I think I am kind of obsessed with those like family dynamics and how things get what we inherit from people from the previous generation and what we can give to the next generations. These are all themes that I'm really working through a lot. And I think, of course, it comes like some of it comes from just my own family, what I've been through. And, like I have an uncle who did have Alzheimer's actually. And like, just don't want to get too personal about it. But, I think it's the only time that I saw my father cry was when his brother didn't recognize him. He didn't know who he was. And I mean, it is such a devastating thing to happen. So, but at the same time, like I think also like what I see also in Caribbean culture is that the way to think about illness or death is not as dramatic as in maybe the rest of Western culture, where it's seen as like a normal thing almost. It's like just part of life, and
Mm.
it's part of the cycle of life. So um and me he's like grown up like in between kind of the two cultures. I get to see the two sides of it, and I think that there is a lot of wisdom there and um a lot of truth to it, where it is true, it is a part of life, and you can't, we're all powerless in front of disease and death, and we can't do anything about it except just take care of the people that we love and make sure that while they're here that we're taking care of them and loving them. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So kind of on that idea of being a caregiver, sort of circling back to your lead character, who again, I loved that you sort of made the choice to put her in these very nurturing roles of like a nurse and a caregiver to her uncle. And then also have this other side of her. And it really, came down to you needed an actress who could portray this sort of range. So I wanted to ask you about your casting process and about finding, the star of this film, who I think does such an incredible job.
Yeah, oh, she's so great, Tatiana. She's a really, really great actress, and I think I hope she's destined for great things, because we put out a casting call, and I saw a lot of different people for the lead role, and it was really funny because in some auditions, like I was actually asking to see both sides in the audition, and you can see straight away who could go there and who could not. Like, one of the things I would ask is just like, okay, I want you to like act out this kind of scene where you're not speaking, but you're just being very, very physical and primal. And at the end, I want you to like give a scream of like, like a ferocious beast kind of thing. And you can see like some of them were just like actually like that. I was like, what? I was like, no, you can put your voice into it and you can like show me what you got, and so I found it was really interesting to see that. It's like, okay, some people just are not comfortable going there or being that physical um, in a role. But yeah, so Tatiana, I saw her and I was like really, really impressed because she just had that physical charisma. She just shows up somewhere and it's like her energy just radiates, she's really something else. But she also has like that range where she can be very, very go into the softness and into the poetry. So I was very, really lucky to find her.
Right, right. Yeah, she seemed like just such a perfect fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wonderful.
she was.
Now costuming and hair as well are a very important part of this. So particularly when she comes out finally in her wrestling outfit, and it's that empowered moment, and even her hair from that point on is a little bit different than it was earlier on. So I wanted to ask you just about the process of creating that look for her and what that was like, because that is such a key moment.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny that you asked because I was actually I remember that moment, and I actually worked with a costume designer because at some point there's just so much that I can do, but I was looking at a lot of different influences, and I really wanted that final wrestling costume to be something that really speaks to kind of her transformation at that moment too, of like bridging the gap between what she gets from her own heritage or what
Mhm.
she got from like the legacy from the uncle with the poetry and everything, and not really coming into herself.
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, wrestling costumes are always very, they're always kind of a caricature of what the
Mhm.
person is supposed to embody, and they go into stereotypes even sometimes. So, I thought it was kind of interesting to toe that line too of like, we don't want something that's just too metaphorical and, because wrestling is a very like theatrical and over the top type of thing too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I loved that moment where she stepped out and it's just and the whole look and like you said, kind of tying together her heritage and along with this new strength that she's coming into. I really loved that moment. So there is a moment then too. So without really, giving anything away, but there is a moment with with some booing where, the emotion to the audience might be a little bit surprising. And I wanted to ask about the choice of just having that and what was important about having that moment for that character.
Well, to me, it kind of represented, those kind of voices in our head who tell us that we're never good enough, or that, or that what we're doing makes no sense, or that kind of thing. So there was part of it was that, and part of it was, um, in the reality of wrestling as well, there is always like a good guy and a bad guy. So, and I like to have that surprise of, well, that she's supposed to be the bad guy in the fight. So, and it's at some point, it's like, it's not even, to me, that was kind of the final message of the whole thing was, it doesn't really matter if you win or lose.
Mhm.
It's what matters is just stepping up and going out there and doing something and doing what you think you're put on this earth to do, whatever that is. It's like,
I love that. I love that. In some of the other like interviews with you that I found online, you had said that this is a story and it's like an origin story for the birth of an ordinary superhero or like an everyday superhero. And I really love that description and wanted to ask you about that and about kind of what that means to you and who that person is.
yeah. Um, I think especially now, like in, pandemic times, it's, um, the way that we talk about like health professionals, it's like, they're on the front lines, they're battling this disease. And so I think, the pandemic has kind of made this film even more relevant, I think. So, um, and especially like here in Quebec, I don't know if it's the same where you are, but a lot of the like essential healthcare workers, like nurses and patient how do you call those, the patient anyway, the patient caretakers, a lot of them are women and a lot of them are, people of color. So, and a lot of that work is either underpaid or, uh, so I found that kind of discourse was really interesting too, where people were like hailing these people as our guardian angels and saviors and all this, but it's like, yeah, but their actual conditions don't reflect that. So, um, yeah, and I think there is like right now they are really being portrayed as these kind of superheroes, but I feel like collecting my thoughts. But what I feel also with the characters is that some of them are not just they're not just she's not just a nurse, she's not just a caretaker, she's also like this complex person who has other things going on and who has dreams and goals and who needs to be nurtured in some way as well. And her way of being nurtured is maybe through wrestling, which is a bit extreme, but I mean, why not? Um, but yeah, it's like they are whole people. So um, yeah, have I answered your question? I'm actually not sure. I think I
Yeah.
went on a tangent a little.
No, and it's good. I think it is, again, it was just beautiful phrasing the way you put it. So I think going off on a tangent is a good thing because you just get to explore that idea a little bit more. And yeah, I think it's fantastic. It works really well. So another thing with this movie, so this movie deals a lot with this idea of finding what it is that makes you feel alive. Like even if it is something that's kind of unusual or that other people might not understand. And that made me wonder about you as a filmmaker, you know, because filmmakers, of course, have to be bold and brave in sort of the stories they tell and step up. And is filmmaking for you that thing that makes you feel alive and kind of brings that to your life?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, creating whatever it is, like I love writing, I love filmmaking. If I could do more of it, I would love that. I'm working on some things. Hopefully, some of it will come to pass. Um, but yeah, whether it's like writing, whether it's poetry, whether it's even like, growing plants, it's like stuff like that just makes me, I just love it. And I think it was like I took some kind of detours to get into filmmaking. Like I went to film school, but then like I did other things for a couple of years, and I'm kind of circling back to it now. But yeah, I think when I was doing other things, I always found there was something missing in my life. So yeah, definitely.
Right. So it's that thing. Wonderful. So what is next for you? You mentioned kind of some other things in the works. If
Yeah,
you're,
I don't want to jinx them though.
you don't have to jinx it. That's fine. I understand.
No, but I can just like just really quickly say like, and one of them is a short film that the script is currently finished, so I'm hoping to try to get funding for that soon-ish.
Mm.
And I'm also working on like the premise for a feature. So my first feature, hopefully that will happen. But I like that's like not that's like just I'm just really starting right now. So like the idea is fully formed, but that's pretty much it. So I need to actually get down to it and then write it and
It's the long
etc.
run. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel confident it will happen. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you.
Hopefully. Yeah, and I have like another project in the works, but it's like it was more like during the beginning of the year, I had this idea for a web series that would be very kind of light and comical, and I
Mhm.
guess it was just to take my mind off things. So like I wrote an episode of that too. So that's the same kind of thing. If I find some interest and we can get it done, then we'll get it done. But yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I definitely look forward to seeing what you do next. Again, I just loved the film. Thank you so much for coming today, and just so we could talk about it a little bit more. And just to remind anybody watching, Wanted Strong Woman. So PRINDIE 2020 happening virtually this year, September 10th to the 13th. Don't miss this one. It really is. It's so empowering, so well done. I'm really excited that we'll be able to share it, hopefully with a lot of people. So thank you so much again, Marilyn, and
Well, thank
congratulations on a
you.
wonderful film. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You.